So today I wanted to give a tour of my Creality Ender 3 printer and its printer enclosure. So down here in the basement, in my man cave, there happens to be pretty much an unused fireplace. Um, I was never used by me and never used by apparently any previous owner. So when I got the 3D printer, I figured no place better to put it than a fireplace, just in case it decides to catch on fire. So there's a couple modifications I had to make to the fireplace. There was a nice wire mesh, spark guard. Took that off pretty easily, easily bolted in, um, and then replaced that with a pair of plexiglass doors. These are actually recycled plexiglass. I would have gone with something thicker, but that plexi actually happened to come with the house, so it made perfect sense to use. Added some hinges, added some gasket material to try and seal it, and drilled a small corner out by the frame here to pass the power through. And then the other major modification was up here. So for the flue, I plugged that with fiberglass insulation, and of course keep the damper closed. This is actually the handle for the damper, and then use some of this automotive insulation to act as both a light reflector and additional insulation to try and keep the heat down in here. And this is held up by powerful magnets because there's a metal frame for the damper. And then these lights got off eBay. I think these are like 2-foot LED lights. Very nice. It provides stupid amounts of light in here. To control those, I have two sawn-off basics. One's of course for light here, which is pretty nice. These are running Tasmoto, so they're on my Home Assistant home automation, so I can control them through the home automation, but I can also control them through the Octoprint interface, which is kind of nice. I have another one here for the heater. This is a small 250 watt personal space heater from Walmart that I got off clearance for like $5. This is a nice one because these are PTCs. They're positive thermal coefficient resistors. That means they pretty much self-regulate. Once they get up to a maximum temperature, they maintain that temperature, and then there's very little risk of this thing catching fire on its own. So that means, though, I can't really push this temperature in here too high. There's a ton of thermal mass in these fire brick, so that means I can only get it up to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit maximum, depending on how long you run the print, of course. But that seems to be about around my limit. So when I run ABS, of course I run this. When I run PLA, I leave it off, and I actually crack the door open at the top to keep the temperatures reasonable. They do slowly creep up. I've had better success with the doors closed with PLA. Drafts are not a good thing for 3D prints in general. So at least that's my running design. So for the printer itself, I've been having pretty good luck with it so far. So let's see, modifications. So I've of course went to the red aluminum feeder unit and modified it a little bit to put some PTFE tube into the side here as the filament guide. Just drill this hole a little bit bigger, and the PTFE tube was actually hot glued in. That works fine. Replaced the couplers in the tube with Capricorn, of course. Hot end is pretty much stock, except I've gone through a Hero Me Gen 2. This is all printed in ABS, actually, off this unit in this enclosure. And then a single 5150 fan. I've also seemed to found too much cooling can sometimes be not a good thing. And then a BL Touch for auto bed leveling. As you can see, the Z end stop is gone. So that's pretty much the major modifications. I did add belt tensioners to both Z and X, or X and Y, sorry. Not strictly needed, but nice to have. I do have a Raspberry Pi running Octopi. It's in this pretty cool enclosure. The Raspberry Pi is actually upside down with all the ports facing out the back. And the neat thing about this enclosure is the airflow pulls cold air through this channel over the Raspberry Pi before it gets pulled in to the printer electronics and stuff. So that's keeps this Raspberry really nice and cool. Extra cover with a full-size SD card thing, but this isn't strictly necessary anymore since I got the Raspberry Pi. Of course, some nice couple drawers, very handy to have. And then I also went with a Meanwell power supply with a nice printed enclosure in the bottom here. Inside here is the 5-volt USB power supply for the Raspberry Pi. And then there's also a relay for the Meanwell power, so I can control the printer power supply from Octoprint. And I have a manual override switch here, so if I want to, I can turn on the printer manually, so without the Raspberry Pi in presence. I do have custom built firmware for it, but nothing super complicated. Of course, with the BL Touch, you need to modify the firmware a little bit. And I do have a Logitech webcam. Is it a C210 or C270? Forget the exact model, but bought it cheap off eBay, and 3D printed a focus ring, which was pretty important because usually these things are not focused well for close up. And then a nice little alarm coming off of this thing, so it gives me a pretty good view of the print. And some other bed modifications. So I did add insulation to the bottom of the bed. I removed the springs entirely, replaced them with aluminum spacers. There's a fiber washer between the bed and the spacers, so this is very rigid. And then the surface is perhaps some of the most controversial. This is polypropylene. You can find these on eBay. I think Creality actually makes it as well. I think this might actually be a Creality one. I can't remember. It's reasonable. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't give you glass smooth finish like glass would, because that glass gives you that very glossy bottom finish. This tends to give you a kind of like a matte finish. It does work pretty well with PLA. It finds it sticks reasonably well if you keep it clean, and every so often you scour it down. So I got my little clean station before every print, or actually after every print. What I do wash it down with acetone, which is probably a little bit overkill, but it works really well. And then every so often scrub the hell out of it with a Brillo brush to re-roughen the surface so everything sticks really well. TPU sticks too damn well to it, so depending on the part, the shape of it, you might not ever get it off. All these gouges are actually from me trying to get TPU prints off of it. ABS sticks pretty well to it too. So I don't know if I'm 100% sold on it, because it's probably not as convenient as like PEX or something, but it works. So that's some of the cool stuff I got going on. I'm gonna switch this guy over to ABS right now. So I figured I'd do a quick little tour and stuff. All right, thanks YouTube.